So, what's up, perps? Yeah, I'm going to start calling everybody perps. That's going to be my thing. If you're a gun owner, you're a perp. That's the way things are going these days. So, might as well just start calling everybody that. I do it in the chats all the time. So, yeah, what's up, perps? It's going to be my new thing. All right, what I wanted to talk about probably not real quick, but for a little bit is the Texas made suppressors. Um, and we're gonna roll through this, and I'll try not to go down too many huge ass rabbit holes because I just got stuck in one. Um, but right now, Texas is their AG, their Attorney General, is suing the ATF because not too long back, Texas passed a law that said they could make firearm suppressors in Texas for use in Texas, and those would not be under the NFA, the National Firearms Act, which, if you believe in the law, then you believe in freedom, and the Constitution should be something that should be completely fine. However, we deal with a bunch of absolute statists that believe in the power of the federal government over the individual these days, which is maddeningly insane. So much I'm like twisting my beard around. But let's get into this. So, if any of you haven't seen my previous videos, to boil everything down, the federal government uses the Interstate Commerce Clause to pass laws governing firearms within states. Because constitutionally, the federal government has no power to regulate firearms in the states. None, zero. It's not there. It's never been there. State constitutions and states can manage firearms within states, but the federal government has no right to. So what the federal government does is they use the Commerce Clause, which basically is supposed to regulate commerce in between two or more states. So a product passing in between two or more states, or actually two states, more states, the federal government has some say-so in it because part of the government's power is supposed to be able to regulate disputes in between states. That's one of their original jobs. So that's why the Interstate Commerce Clause is there. So if two states had a dispute about certain issues in commerce, the federal government could come in and mediate in between those two states. Not how the Commerce Clause is used. The Commerce Clause is used by a bunch of statists to actually tell states what they can and can't do. Now, Texas is saying that we want to make suppressors in Texas for Texans that will be used in Texas, that will not be sold in other states. Therefore, the government has no say-so in Texas making these suppressors. What you have to understand about the Interstate Commerce Clause is in the past, the federal government has actually, and it's been upheld by the courts, said that if you are not participating in interstate commerce, that you are actually negatively affecting interstate commerce. Therefore, we have the right to govern that product. It's absolutely insane. But there it is. So let's head into this real quick because I just want to go through, I want to show a couple of things real quick. Let's turn the tunes up. Get rid of that. All right, so this is coming from Ken Paxton's website or webpage for the Attorney General. And this goes through their lawsuit. So they're actually suing for an injunction. Basically saying that the ATF has no right to regulate Texas-made suppressors. The federal government has no interest in these suppressors. The federal government will, in fact, try to regulate these suppressors, and they'll do it by a couple of different means. One, they'll say that since these suppressors are only being sold inside Texas, that they are negatively affecting commerce outside of Texas. Another absolute idiotic, moronic argument. so that they have the right to regulate these suppressors. And then they will also say that, well, someone else from another state could come to Texas and theoretically purchase one of these suppressors and then go back home with that suppressor, and that suppressor will not be registered under the NFA, and therefore we have the right to actually manage these suppressors that are going to be made and sold in Texas. These people will use any reason, no matter how screwed the logic is, to actually regulate suppressors or silencers. It's absolutely retarded. Anybody with any sense can see that. Those of you that are absolute statists that believe in the power of the government over the individual. If you didn't see my last video, I recommended people like you to go to your cabinet in your kitchen and find the biggest, heaviest frying pan you could find and beat yourself basically into unconsciousness or until you could have a logical thought. I'm going to restate that argument just a little bit. I want you to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or any place that sells tools and find the biggest, heaviest hammer that you can possibly find and do the same thing. Beat yourself right in the head with it, all about the face, neck, everywhere, until you can have a actual logical thought, or you just basically make yourself unconscious. Because you being unconscious and not being able to speak to the rest of us would do way, way great things for the rest of our mental health. Because you are an absolute frustrating tool. So let's see. Let's get back down into this. This is what Ken Paxton is saying. Our Second Amendment rights must be protected, and I will continue to protect Texans from federal overreach, interfering with that inalienable right. The federal government cannot simply override the Constitution. God, I wish that was true. However, we have this court called the Supreme Court, in which these generally nine people sit on, and generally those 9 people have been composed of statists that need to beat themselves in the head with hammers, and they don't care about our Constitution or natural rights or anything of that nature, which is how the 1934 and any other gun control gets upheld. I will not allow them to tarnish the freedom and values Americans hold dear. This is going to be a really interesting case to follow. And I'm going to switch over. Let's see. Let's go to the lawsuit itself, the text of the lawsuit. I think this is it, I believe. So this is the actual text of the lawsuit. Now, in the text of this lawsuit, it lists a couple of different people who want to produce Texas-made suppressors, and it lists a couple of different cases for suppressors, definition of suppressors. That's another rabbit hole I just went down and got stuck in for a few minutes. But this I thought, I haven't read the whole suit, but this I thought is very interesting in Ken Paxton's suit against the federal government and the ATF. This was some of their supporting information. It says, while DOJ and ATF have historically not supported removal of items from the National Firearms Act of 1934, the change in public acceptance of silencers arguably indicates the reason for their inclusion in the National Firearms Act is archaic, and historically reluctance to removing them from the National Firearms Act should be reevaluated. It's a nice legal way of saying this is complete horse shit. Which is probably why I'm not a lawyer. I tend to speak in very plain terms. Um, let's see. Uh, ATF's experience with criminal use of silencers also supports reassessing their inclusion in the National Firearms Act of 1934. On average, in the past 10 years, ATF has only recommended 44 defendants a year for prosecution on silencer related violations. Now realize those 44 cases, 99% of them are this person just has a silencer or this person just has parts that could become a silencer. So they are recommended for prosecution. This is not the hitman screwing the silencer on the gun and going out and one tapping some dude in the back of the head. That's not what's happening. Um, let's see. Where was that? I kind of lost place. For prosecution, silencer related. Okay. Approximately only 6 of the defendants had prior felony convictions. Moreover, consistent with this low number of prosecution referrals, silencers are very rarely used in criminal shootings, like almost never. There was a guy who used one at a naval yard shooting in Virginia, a couple years ago. And yes, he used a silencer on a handgun, or 2 handguns, I can't remember whether it's 1 or 2. But even with that suppressor or silencer used, people a floor or 2 above him could still hear the shots. This isn't John Wick where people are shooting at each other in a subway and no one knows what's happening because the guns are so quiet. If you think that's the way suppressors or silencers work, again, refer back to my earlier thoughts on what you should do with the biggest hammer you can possibly find. And I would make an addition to that argument. Please do everything you can medically, surgically, chemically to not breed. You're already a stain on our gene pool, and we really don't need any more of you running around. That being said, back to what we're talking about. Given the lack of criminality associated with silencers, it is reasonable to conclude that they should not be viewed as a threat to public safety, necessitating National Firearms Act classification, and should be considered for reclassification under the Gun Control Act of '68. Suppressors, silencers, in a lot of other developed countries, you can buy right over the counter if you can get the gun. That's the other big thing. If you can get the gun, you can buy the silencer, the suppressor right over the counter. They think it's quite polite to use these. In America, we have an overabundance of what we call stupid people. And unfortunately, that overabundance is getting worse and worse. And suppressors or silencers are viewed as this big evil object. And I've got another bill I'm going to cover over that later. That somehow make guns more and more lethal. Of course, these people don't know the difference in between a flash suppressor, a muzzle brake. I still, for the life of me, don't get the point on how we ended up to where we have the dumbest among us actually making laws. I still don't get that. So this will be an interesting lawsuit to follow. Understand this is a challenge to the Interstate Commerce Clause powers of the federal government, which could be huge. If Texas and other states can challenge that Interstate Commerce Clause power that the federal government uses for gun control, then we can erode that and erode that and erode that and hopefully start overturning things like the National Firearms Act or the Gun Control Act of 68 or 86, we can start getting through those. We'll see how it goes. At present, we have a pretty decent Supreme Court. I still think there should be something passed that says if a judge on any court, Supreme or others, makes a decision that is repugnant to the Constitution, they should be impeached immediately. That should be a judge's only requirements. Will you abide by the Constitution? Will all of your decisions, no matter your feelings, fall within the Constitution? If those decisions don't, you should not be on a court. Period. Ever. You shouldn't be able to own a law book. You shouldn't be able to watch Nick Rekieta on YouTube. Well, no, I take that back. Maybe you should watch Nick Rekieta from Rekieta Law on YouTube because you might learn something. But you should not be a judge until you can actually respect the Constitution, the basis for our federal laws. You should not be a judge if you can't respect your state's constitution, which is the basis for your state laws. But anyway, that's this Texas suppressor interstate commerce clause lawsuit going on right now. And I'll try to remember to link this in the description of this video. So if you guys did want to read Ken Paxton's statement on this, or if you wanted to read the lawsuit itself, you can read that. If you want to know about anything on the Interstate Commerce Clause, I still need to do a really deep dive into that. But I think one or two of my initial videos, I went into it quite a bit. Because the Interstate Commerce Clause is the basis for federal gun control, period. End of story. That's why anytime you read a gun control law, it mentions interstate or foreign commerce. So, perps, y'all be cool. I'm going to leave this one here, and I don't know the next video I'm going to shoot, but I probably will shoot something else here in just a little bit. So, y'all be cool. I'm out.